So now we're going to talk about responsive design. Gotta love the original Batman. Is anybody in here seeing the original Batman show? You're all too young for that. Or too Australian. One or the other. Yeah, Adam West, yeah. Yeah. All right, so we're going to talk about responsive design. We're going to talk about why mobile first, how we define the viewport, what that is, defining layouts with wireframing, using the Chrome Dev Tools, so the cool things about it and the pitfalls, deployment. So we'll talk about deployment today too in the midst of this lesson, because you're going to have to deploy your portfolio site, and I'll talk to you about why I think you should deploy early and often. And then we'll design our site for mobile. Okay, we'll fix our layout because the layout's not ideal. There are a couple of issues with it. Then we're going to use media queries to make our site responsive for other screen sizes. So we'll add styling for tablet and desktop. All right, here we go. Responsive web design was originally defined by Ethan in a list apart. And it means that our design responds to the needs of the users and the devices that they're using at a really basic level. So the layout changes based on the size and capabilities of the device. For example, on a phone, users would see content shown in a single column view, most likely, and a tablet might show the same content in 2 columns. Mobile first. Just trust me on this, okay? When we design web applications and pages, we don't know what screen size our user is going to use, and most likely it's going to be on a phone. Most likely. I mean, what do you look at web pages on? Mostly your phone, right? So to make our lives easier as developers and our code less complicated, the best starting point is to determine and design for the smallest screen. And then you adjust the styling for bigger screens with media breakpoints. As your browser window gets bigger, so you add media breakpoints and you change some styling. But always start styling for the smallest screen first. And that's what mobile first design is. What that means is all of your styling in your SAS files, not your CSS files, in your SAS files, the styling that you write should pertain to a mobile phone size. So you shouldn't have a media query for a mobile phone size, because all of your styling applies to a mobile phone size, and you have media queries for bigger screen sizes. Okay? So if I see a media query for a mobile phone size, I'm going to know you didn't use mobile first. All right? Use mobile first. Trust me, there have been so many tears spilled over not designing for mobile first. Yes, Aiden.
Why design first?
Huh?
Why design mobile first?
Because if you design for a larger screen, the changes you have to make to make that look good on a smaller screen are always more than the changes you have to make to go from a smaller screen to a bigger screen. And probably 90% of your users are going to look at your content on a small screen, depending on what you're making, okay?
You know
Yes.
me, and I do it.
Jack?
No, everyone does it. You're wrong.
Jack?
For this testing, can we just make our browser smaller?
Yes, I'm going to talk about that, so hold on to that for the moment, and I'm going to talk about it. All right, so in order to have our style change based on the size of the screen, we have to use the viewport. So we already mentioned this. We've already included this in our HTML. We see it's included in like the basic HTML5 template that we get in VS Code. It's this meta tag for viewport. We've seen it. What does it mean? We know it has to be there. What does it mean? So it controls the width and the scaling of the browser's viewport. That's what it does. And it makes sure that your page is accessible by not disabling user scaling. Okay, so if that's missing, then things don't behave the way that users expect them to when they resize their screen, or they use your application on different screen sizes. So we have width equals device width is one of the things that we see here. And what that does is it matches the screen width and device independent pixels. Okay? And then we have initial scale equals 1.0, which establishes a one-to-one relationship between the CSS pixels and the device independent pixels. Okay? That's what those two things do. All right, so when we're going to design a website, we really need to do some wireframing first. You will also be kicking yourself if you don't do this first. If you just start writing some code and making your layout and then try to sort it out later, it's going to be harder and take longer and more likely that you're going to have to redo stuff that you did. So one thing that we do with wireframes is defining the layout for different screen sizes. You can also do other things with wireframes like indicating how navigation works between screens. So for this lesson, we saw earlier the wireframes that I created. Let's just take another look. So these are the three basic wireframes I created, where this is the mobile design, so we just have one column layout basically. That's typically what you're going to see on a mobile phone because you only have less than 400 pixels wide. That's not a lot of pixels. So you don't want to try to have two columns there. The content's going to be unreadable. When we get to the tablet size, then we can spread things out a bit more. We can have two columns for some of our content if we want to. We've got some more space to work with. In the desktop size, I'm using the same layout, but I'm going to do things like make the font bigger, because we've got more space and we can use a bigger font. But the major change that I'm going to propose is that we just go from a single column layout to having two columns for that middle section when we have a larger screen. So that's what we're going to code to today, okay? And then you can practice doing some other things with your portfolio. So you can make your wireframe to get an idea of how you want things to look, and then you can refer to that when you're defining your layout. All right, so using the Chrome responsive settings in the developer tools, has anybody done that before? Yeah? That's really handy, super convenient, because it lets you see stuff right away, and you can have a play right with the dev tools, making changes to the styling and see it immediately on the screen, and that's all really cool. But you need to understand that it's not always accurate. What you see in those dev tools and that responsive setting may not be exactly what it's going to look like when you look at it on a phone. Okay, so you can't rely on it 100%. You shouldn't use that as your only means of testing and be like, oh, it looks good there, because then you'll be surprised when you actually look at it on a phone. You might be surprised and be like, it didn't look like that when I looked at it in dev tools. So that's why I think it's really important to go ahead and use that, because it's really handy. You can do some quick dev with that. I start with that. I always start with that, and you'll see me do that today. But once I get to a point where I think, okay, this looks about right to me in the mobile layout, this looks about right, I deploy it somewhere so I can look at it on my phone. Okay? So you don't want to go too far before you get to that point. As soon as you feel like the layout's good, even if there might be small tweaks you want to make, when you feel like the layout's good, get it deployed and look at it on your phone. And if you have more than one screen size that you can look at, if you know somebody with a different kind of phone, then have a look from a couple of phones. Or send a message to your friend or something, send them the link, because you deploy it, it'll be publicly available. Send them the link to your site and ask them to look at it for you, if you don't have another device size. So I think this is really important. So let's talk about deployment. So has anybody tried to deploy a website more than 5 years ago? Like when you had to FTP your files over?
That's all I know.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to show you how easy it is to do now. You're going to be like, what? But people who never try to deploy the kind of old-fashioned way now it's the old-fashioned way. People who haven't tried to do that, when I show them this, they're like, so what? you can drag and drop. Can't you do that with like anything? And I'm like, no, actually, you couldn't do that to deploy websites. It was really a pain in the butt to deploy websites before, but it's super easy now. So I'm just going to show you two really simple options, and you don't have to use both of them. You can use one or the other, and you can decide which one you like. So GitHub Pages is one way. Has anybody deployed anything with GitHub Pages before? Okay, so it's easy to do. It's not hard. I'll show you how to do it. And another is Netlify. So Netlify, I only recently discovered. Another instructor told me about it and how easy it was to quickly deploy, and then I tried it and I was like, that is so cool. So the issue with both of these, you can attach to your repo. Okay, so GitHub Pages is going to work off of a repo that you've got. So you add this GitHub Pages sort of functionality to a repo, and you indicate a branch, and then it creates a publicly available URL where it serves up your website. Okay, so it will automatically get updated when you push changes to your repo on that branch. It'll update what's there. Very cool. But there is the tiniest delay, and that delay can vary a little bit. And when you're trying to debug something and you're not sure why isn't it changing? Is it because it hasn't actually deployed yet, or is it because the change I just made didn't make any difference? You know, and that gets to be a little bit frustrating. So that's where I think Netlify has a little bit of a benefit. So Netlify, you can also have it connect to a GitHub repo and branch. So it does the same thing as GitHub Pages. But you can also drag and drop deploy, and it takes like 30 seconds to update. And that's very cool. Okay? So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, all right, so if you have a Netlify account, you can try this with me, and otherwise, just watch. Netlify accounts are free. So I'm going to go to Netlify. And I'm going to log in. And I'm going to do a new site from Git. So GitHub. And I'm going to do it from, I actually don't have this in my account. Okay, I might just have to fork it over to my account. Let me do that real quick. Oh no, look, it lets me pick. Yay. So I'm going to put it on this one. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to ask you when, because I know the rubric's out, but I was going to ask you when we officially get assigned the portfolio assignment.
Tomorrow morning.
Yeah, obviously just tomorrow.
That's right. I don't know what's happening here. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. All right, I'm just going to show you something else. So see, it's in really light text here. Want to deploy a new site without connecting to Git? Drag and drop your site folder here. Okay? And I can literally just go here and go to my repo. And, oops, that's not the right place. go to my repo. Yes, I have a lot of repos. Here we go. This one. And I'm just going to drop it over there. Just going to drop it right in. And then it's done. And then I just click on the link. And there it is. And then here, I'll put the URL in Slack.
Can you change that?
I don't know. I haven't tried. So I can go to this site on my phone. Which you can too. Actually, I'm going to look at it from Slack. That would be smarter. Get it from Slack, and I can just click on the link. You guys can do this too. You can click on the link from your phone if you have Slack on your phone. And then I can look at the site from my phone, right? That's totally cool. Yeah, Jack?
With this here, can you add tags like SOE and stuff and like change the URL and get a free domain from it?
You probably, I don't know if you can with the free version. I haven't looked into it. I will though. But yeah, you can do anything that you could with deploying it anywhere else. Yeah.
It's looking all right on the phone. We haven't even got a...
Yeah, we haven't even done anything yet, but there are a couple of things that I don't like about it. So, are you guys looking at it from your phone? So, like the image, where the image is, and the image caption, you can't even see it, it's not over the image. And then the resources section, like I really want that home. There is, you can't even see it because it's dark. The home link I really want over on the side of the resources header, you know, and not where it is now.
It is on the side.
On mine, it's not. No, like I want it like over here. I want home right there instead of underneath it. So there are just a few things. Like it's almost okay how it is. We haven't even applied any layout to it, but it's like it's not awful. But there are some things that we could do to make it better, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get it looking really good on the phone, and then we'll make changes for the other screen sizes. Okay? But now I've got it deployed, and I can check when I make changes on an actual phone, which is super handy. What you'll see me do though,
Mouse refresh as well.
I'll have to redeploy it. Okay? But, so what you'll see me do is I'll make changes and use DevTools, you know, at first, and then when I feel like, yeah, this looks right to me, then I'll redeploy it in Netlify, and I'll look at it from my phone. And it'll take like 30 seconds to do that, because I just literally have to drag that folder over again, and it takes just a few seconds, and it'll update what's there, you know? So it's really a really quick dev cycle. Nothing like how it used to be when I used to upload website content over a 32 baud modem and FTP, which was really frustrating. Every time you made a little change that you wanted to see, you had to re-push it out there, and it would take like 15 minutes. Yeah, you had to know all the commands. Yeah. All right. So let's get to it. I'll show you GitHub Pages later, okay? We'll look at how we do it with GitHub Pages too. So let's make a few small changes to start with. So what I plan to do is to have a grid layout overall, and then I'm going to flex inside a couple of places to make things go where I want them to. So the first thing I'm going to do, because I'm going to be using grid and flex, is I'm going to set the width of all the sections to 100%. Okay? Now, I would do that by just adding one piece of styling to section, and I would add that to my home SCSS. So I'll just add a styling paragraph for section and say width 100%. And then we're going to add 5.5, I think we might have done this already, padding to image. We did that already, so ignore that. We're going to move the caption to the bottom left of the image using relative and absolute. So we'll set position relative on the main image section, okay? Then set position absolute on the fig caption. Then we're going to set the top, and I'll tell you why in a minute why I'm doing top and not bottom. Set the top to 280 pix and left to 20 pix on fig caption. We're going to see how that looks. All right, so to set ourselves up where we've got live server running, so wherever you have live server running right now, if you open DevTools, which you can do with Inspect, you guys know how to do that, right? So get to DevTools, and then this little thing here, this little icon here, if you click on that, it puts it into responsive mode, and then there's a drop down, and I'm just going to pick the iPhone 6, 7, 8 drop down, and then we can see what it looks like. Now, I can already see that the way this looks here isn't exactly how it looks on my phone. On my phone, the image is like way over here on the right. It falls off the screen. But otherwise, it mostly looks like it does here. So this is what we're going to work with for now while we're making some changes to see really quickly the effect that the changes are making. So in my home CSS, I'm just going to add it at the top. It doesn't necessarily have to be there. The width of section to 100%. And I don't think that's going to change anything at all at the moment. It's just going to help us when we're applying layouts. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fix up my image caption. So in main image, I'm going to set the position to relative. And then within main image, if you look at the HTML, within main image, I have an image and I have a fig caption. And so I'm going to set fig caption to absolute, and I'm going to position it relative to main image. So that's why I'm setting position to relative on main image. I'm going to absolutely position the fig caption relative to the main image, which is its container. So I'm going to create a nested style here for fig caption. And I'm going to set its position to absolute. And I'm going to set bottom to 280 pix and left to 20 pix. And then I'm going to see how that looks. Oh, that's not right. It wasn't bottom, it was top. Okay, so that's okay. It could probably actually go down a little bit, but before I adjusted that minute bit, I probably want to actually look at it on a phone and not necessarily trust the way it looks here. It may look the same on a phone. I could move it down a little bit more.
Yeah,
but let's try. If I moved it down to 285, that's better. And then we can see what it looks like on the phone.
What was your left?
Left was 20. And the reason it's so big is because I'm positioning it inside of that main image container. So if we look, so see how big main image actually takes up, that section takes up 100% of the width, which I've done on purpose because I'm going to align it and stuff with layout in a minute, and I want it to be 100% of the width. So if you look at, yeah, you want to make sure you're watching SAS.
Yeah, but mine didn't change.
So make sure you're looking at, in your browser, at your live server. Maybe restart your live server. You can look at your CSS. If things aren't changing, the things to look at are, okay, look at your CSS. Do you see the change in your CSS that you just made? So here's something I just added in my CSS. Make sure your live server's running. make sure it was in main image fig caption. So in your CSS you should have a main image fig caption. If you don't, then it's not generating your CSS. So
Not watching.
it's not. Look, you have to click that. Now it's watching. Okay. So it should your watch CSS should say watching. Okay. If it says watch SAS, then it's not watching. You have to click it, and it'll be watching, and it'll make changes to your CSS. Okay. So yes.
It doesn't have big caption. Inspector tools.
I right click. There's a keyboard shortcut, but if you right click inspect, okay, that's weird.
Mine's not still not changed.
Oh, you're in Safari. That's why. You have to be
Mine's still not.
Oh god, that was terrible.
Even though
You're looking at home. Oh, look, there's a red line. Red line means you've got an error. You missed. Okay.
I'm good. That was space, but I'm good. Anything else I need to add? It's the
What did this email say that it says? Oh, you're missing a colon. Left colon. Okay.
Should it have a big caption, main image, or big caption?
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Janelle.
Yes.
Would you mind just going back to the home?
Yes. The very top, I have section with the 100%. Did everybody else get the caption over the picture? Yeah?
Should I need to do anything?
Okay. So now we're going to lay out our mobile design in this one column grid. So if you look in our HTML and you collapse it so that if we look at our index HTML and we collapse the sections, then you can see inside of container we have these four sections. Okay, we have these four sections inside a container. And we're going to lay them out, one on top of the other. Hey guys, Aiden, we're going to lay them one on top of the other in a grid layout, in a single column. Okay? So, to do that, we're going to set a grid layout in container. How do we do that? Yeah, display grid. Okay, to create a grid layout in container. We're going to create grid areas for the four areas. So how do we create one column? How do we do that?
Grid template columns
One FR. Yeah. And then we're going to create grid areas. Do you remember grid area? Grid area is how we give a name to a particular area. So we're going to create grid areas for these four IDs. This one's not an ID, it's just footer, I think. Do I have an ID for it? Yeah, it does. Okay, so for those four IDs, we're going to create a grid area. Okay, how do we create grid areas? So we're going to go to, first let's go to our page, because two of these things are in page. Main nav is in there. So how do we add a grid area to this? What do I type? So here we're just creating a grid area. And I'm just going to call it main nav. I'm going to give it the same name as the section, and that's just to make my code more readable and understandable. I know that I defined this as footer, but I'm going to change it to the ID. They point to the same thing, okay? And then I'm going to call this grid area, guess what I'm going to call it? Yeah. Okay, so that's the top and the bottom one. And all grid area does is give it a name. Okay? That's all I'm doing is giving them a name. Now I'm going to go to home because that's where the where my main is. Now main I don't have a tag for yet. Look at index.html again. Actually I have main nav and main. These two areas. So main nav I've got defined here. Oh, not defined. I've already done main nav here, so that's okay. The other one that I need is main and resources. Okay, so main's going to be here, but I don't have a section defined for it yet in my styles. So I need to add one. I'll just put it up here. None of these styles override each other, so it doesn't really matter what order. So main, I'm going to give a grid area that I'll call main. And where do you think I should put the resources grid area? Yeah, so I'm going to go to my resources, and I don't have one defined for it yet. So again, these four areas are corresponding to what I see in my index.html. When I collapse down those sections, these are the four main areas of my page. Okay? Main, nav, main, resources, footer. Now, I've given them all a name. Now, where am I going to define grid template areas? And my grid display and grid template columns and that stuff. Where does that go? What's my grid container? What's my grid container?
What did you put in resources?
What's my grid container? My grid container is container. That's what it's called. It's called container. So the grid container is the container that contains the grid areas, right? So my grid container is container. That's where I need to define my other grid settings. So in containers in home, right? So in container, what's the first thing I need to do?
Can you just go back to resources for a minute?
In resources, I just have a grid area called resources. Now, how do I define a grid layout in container? What's the first thing I need to do? Anybody?
Display grid?
Yes. And I already said I'm going to have grid, template, columns, 1FR. I just want one column. And I'm using grid, template, areas. Yeah? And what does it look like again? Yeah? That's right. So I could put it in my file like this if I want. So you can see the, oops. I could do it like that.
Do we have to mention the rules to be auto? The template rules to be auto?
We don't have to. Yeah, we could. It wouldn't hurt.
Doesn't have to go downwards though? It does have to go.
It will. Do you mean it's going to be in one column?
Yeah.
But you don't have to type it in
I
like
can type
this.
it in one
You can
line.
type it in just one long line, but this way kind of gives you a visual representation of this is what I'm laying out.
But because it's saying 1FR, it's only looking for one at a time.
That's right. That's right. So I only have one area on each
Okay.
line.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I need. Yeah, that's it. I only have one area on each line because I only have one column. So if I had multiple columns, I would have space-separated areas between those quotes, right? If I were spanning multiple columns. So I don't think this is probably going to have changed much. Let's have a look. So it really still looks the same, doesn't it? So yours is broken. Yes? Main image is inside of main. Main image is one of three sections in main. So there's main primary, main image, and main secondary.
Can I see the code of the code, please?
Mine is still not
Just follow a little bit further down.
Yeah. So we have grid area main in here. Main nav and footer in our page SCSS. That's where I define those grid areas, and resources is defined in resources SCSS.
The containers was in your home.
Yeah.
Grid area, grid area main. So if they're white because they're grids, or
What's that?
why are they white?
What do you mean?
The grid areas.
I'm not sure what you mean.
The grid areas, why are they white?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it was.
Maybe because they're grid areas. Okay, and then we're going to add one more thing to container, which is justify items to center.
Where are you in?
And it hasn't really had a lot of impact on what it looks like because we're kind of laid out that way. This is in home, yeah, the justify item center. And it hasn't taken care of a couple of problems that we've got, like that this home is over there. The image still isn't centered. And that's because this image is sitting inside of that main container. So the main container is centered, but the image isn't centered inside of there. So there's still some more stuff we've got to do.
And the words are a bit.
Yeah, we're still going off the side here, too. So there's something going on there that we need to fix. Okay? All right, so I want to center items within the main section into a single column. So we're going to use flex in the main section to do this, and it's going to make it easy for us to change things for our bigger screen layout if we do that. So we're going to make main a flex container. So even though we've got a grid container, we can define a flex container inside of that grid container, or we could have defined another grid container, but I'm going to use a flex container. So we're going to make main a flex container, and we're going to make it flow vertically using flex wrap, and we're going to center it with justify content and align items. So if we just make the first change to main and set its display to flex. Okay? Now if I go look, ooh, that didn't make things better. That's bad. Yeah, that's not, I mean, it's artistic, maybe. Not what I was going for. So this because we don't have wrap on.
The one column, isn't it? Flex wrap.
If I set flex wrap to wrap, that's better. Then we kind of go back to where we were. But inside of there now I've got a flex container. Okay. So I'm going to set justify content to center and align items to center.
Oh, that was like a textbook.
Nope. All it's going to do is make sure that within the main container, which kind of goes from here down to here, that the content, do you see, remember how we used to overspill before? Do you remember how it was going off the side? This section was going off the side, so it still is because we have resources down here still falling off the side, but by putting flex inside of the main area, we've got everything laid out nicely in the main section.
What you put in a line item?
Align items also goes in main.
Center.
Center, yeah. So I just want to align things vertically centered and horizontally centered.
Display flex should go inside the grid area always.
But it pitches.
No, not necessarily.
But
It's just
it
a choice.
pitches still over to the left.
It is, so I still have to fix that. Okay, so let's see what we're going to do next. So the main header, did it move our main header over? I didn't even think to look at that. Oh yeah, we don't want the main header in the middle though. That's not what I'm going for. I really do want it to the left. Okay, so we can move it over to the left. We can move it to the left. And the way we're going to move it to the left, because we don't have, you know how we have align self? Do you guys remember align self? In Flex, that will allow us to, along the cross axis, which in our case is vertical right now because we have a default flex direction of row. So our cross axis is vertical, and we could use align self to move individual items up and down on the vertical axis, but there isn't a justify self. I don't know why. It seems to me like there should be. There isn't. So there's no way to have an individual flex item move along the main axis with justify self. There's no such property. So what we're going to do is we're going to use margin right auto to left justify the main header, because I want to push the main header back over to the left where it was. I don't want it to be centered like the other items in this flex container. So let's go to main header. Main header. Do we have a main header yet? We don't. Okay, so let's go to main header. And we're going to say margin right auto. And if you remember from the other day, Wednesday, what that effectively does is push it over to the left. So now it's back over on the left where I want it. Okay? Now the resources section still has an alignment problem. So we're going to also make the resources a flex container. Just like we made the main a flex container, we're going to make resources a flex container. And we're going to set flex wrap to wrap. and justify content to center.
Could you call it main, header, and margin order?
Main dash header.
Oh, margin right order.
Margin right auto. Now in resources, we have to go to our resources at CSS.
Why is it margin right?
Because I want to push it to the left. I don't want it to be centered. I want it to be pushed to the left. So I said margin right auto says take up as much room on the right as you can.
Right.
And that effectively pushes it over to the left. So resources, I'm going to set a display flex. If I just do that and go look, once again we're like, that's not what I want. And that's because by default there's no wrap. Okay, so I'm going to set flex wrap to wrap, justify content to center, and then I can also align items, although I didn't have that in the slide. And then immediately as you're typing those things, and this looks pretty good, right? Much better. But what do you notice? Like as I'm typing that, what does your little voice say? Hopefully the same thing mine does, but you never know. I just typed these same 4 lines somewhere else, didn't I? So what could I do?
Could make a mix in.
I could make a mix-in, and I'm just going to call it basic flex. So I'm going to go to my mix-in file. Not that one, the SCSS file. Mixins.scss. And for now I'm not going to give it any arguments. I'm just going to set display flex. I could actually just copy those lines from the other place.
We need to take them out.
Yeah, you could.
Where do we put it? In pages? Resources?
In resources and in home.
Oh, so you totally get rid of it.
Just get rid of it from there.
Oh, yeah. We leave the grid thing there. And CSS. In main.
Yeah, in main and resources we can replace that. So that's pretty good, but I need to, this isn't exactly how I want here.
Don't you have to put something in there to
Include?
Oh, include.
Include your mix in, so include basic flex. This is almost right, but I really want this over here and this over here. Okay? And so there are a number of ways we could do that.
Hang on, wait. Did we have to call it a dollar or anything? No, basically. And what did you say? We had it in home and in.
So the other thing is, I kind of wanted this to be like centered with that, but it actually looks okay where it is too. So you can choose to do a line self or not. But I do want to push it over. So if I set margin left auto on the link that inside of resources nav, that will push the header over to the left and will push the link over to the right, which is what I want to happen. So that's the easiest way for me to accomplish those things.
So what
Okay?
do you do?
So in resources nav, so this is in the resources file,
Yeah.
I'm going to set margin left to auto. And what that does is it pushes it apart. Okay, so it says it says this is my resources nav. It says take up as much space as you can on the left side, which pushes the header over to the left side and pushes this up against the right side.
So it was in home.
It's in resources. This bit's in resources.
I've got add include basic flex in home and main.
Yep.
And in resources.
You have include basic flex and resources.
Yeah, but I've got a,
And you have margin.
I've got a red line.
No, does not need colon.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
So hang on.
There. Don't need a colon. There you go.
Yeah.
And then I said do align self, but since we put that align items, I think on the flex container, it's okay. So this looks pretty good. You don't need align self.
Right.
If we do put it, let's see what happens. Yeah, it doesn't change anything because I added align items. I didn't do that in my original presentation, but it makes sense to do it anyway. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. This is at this point, I would redeploy this into Netlify. So I just go back to Netlify. I'm going to close the link. I go back to here, and then you can click on deploys. And then here's the little space to drag it over. So I just go back here and drag it back there, and it will redeploy it.
Condescending Darwin.
Condescending Darwin.
Why is it called condescending Darwin?
It just makes up names. Yeah, it's random generated.
Oh, well,
So
can you rename it?
this is in the big size, right? I'm going to look at it from my phone. I could also inspect from here, but it's going to look like it. This doesn't look right. I still have.
Did you maybe not save some of those changes?
No, this could be. I'm going to look at it from my phone. Hang on.
Mine
I'm just
looks
going to
okay
refresh.
on-
What do you mean, like
Maybe I didn't save some of my changes, but I thought I did. Yeah, I must have. It may be that
On my phone it doesn't look nice.
no, it's still spilling off the side, isn't it?
I refreshed it again and it's still going off the side.
It does still go off the side, and you can see here that it goes off the side.
But on my deploy dev tools, it doesn't go off the side.
Yeah,
But on yours it does. Oh,
it actually doesn't on mine. Yeah, on my local and DevTools, it looks good.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder. I'm going to try this again. Nope, still goes off the side. It looks okay on your phone?
No, my phone it goes off the side. The container goes right off the side and home is off the side. I need a media query.
No, it's
I don't know.
it's not that. Let me make sure that the image I'm using. Hang on a second. I think I know what it is.
The whole thing is off of mine.
I think I know what it is.
no, because I want to get these done. Well, no.
Yeah, I think it's no, that should be okay. That should be all right. Yeah.
When you so you could set up a custom domain for your own one.
Oh, cool.
I'm sure you can change.
Yeah, you go to general settings and then change site name.
There you go.
I didn't want
Nice.
to play it there. No.
So I'm not really sure why. So for you guys, if you look at it on your phone, does it look, is there a problem with it? Like it is on mine. It goes off the side on mine.
Yeah, it goes up the
Yeah.
side.
I'm going to redeploy it again.
Everything else is probably okay.
Okay, so I'm going to look at 359. So the image area 359. $375. Section main is $375. What in there is $375? Okay.
That would be really annoying if it looks fine here and then it looks so bad here.
It is a bit. So what I want to do is I want to see, I'm trying to pinpoint what is it. That's 375 also. So 375 you can see is the viewport size here, and that's why it takes up 375, which is what I would expect it to do, 375 wide. But for whatever reason, I don't know what is causing that. I'm just going to compare so I'll show you where is it? So this is the one. Just want to see. Oh, it's also going over. Interesting. Yeah, so I can't explain it at the moment. So I'll do some research and figure it out. It honestly shouldn't be, because this whole area, if I look at that area in the inspector, it tells me it's 375 wide, which is how wide the screen is. And if I change it, for example, to this one, which is 360 wide, and then I look at main, it changes to 360 wide, which is what I expect. So it should be exactly as wide as the viewport is, which it's telling me it is. Yet the The container is also 360 wide. Resources is 360 wide. Yeah, which they should be. So I'm not sure why it's showing up that way. Let's go back to it, okay? I'll have a look at it. Okay, so we took care of this. All right, so let's talk about using media queries. So if we want to make changes for larger screen sizes, we have to use a media query so that we know when the device size gets bigger. So the structure of a media query is at media, and then you can use the keyword not or only if you want to, if you want the opposite of or only. And then the media type, and then you can string together with and or not different media features. Okay? So let's look at what media type and media features are. And you should define your media queries after all your basic styles, because it's always styles you're applying on top of your basic styles. So always put them at the bottom of your SCSS file. All right, so media types are all, which is the default. And that means that this query, whatever's in the block for this query, is going to be applied to all media types. Print is what's used for printers. Screen is what's used for computer screens and tablets and smartphones, etc. When you're looking on a screen. Speech is used for screen readers. We're going to use media type screen. So that's the one that you'll see for changing the layout of what you see on the screen. A media feature is a condition that we want to check. So the two most common media features that we use for responsive design are max width and min width. So max width returns true as long as the viewport's width is the same or smaller than the given value, and min width returns true as long as the viewport's width is the same or larger than the given value. But there are a lot more media features, so you can have a look at those. But these are the two that you generally see used for responsive design. So if we want to apply styles for anything that's at least as big as a tablet, we could use min width in our media query. Okay, to say if the width is this big or bigger, then I want you to make these style changes. That's basically what we're saying. So we're going to add a media query for a larger screen. So if you can check the default sizes for typical screens using the developer tool. So if you pick iPad, for example, it'll show you 768 is the width of an iPad. There's also an iPad Pro setting, and that one will be a bit bigger. We're going to add a media query that'll change the layout of main image and main secondary when the mid width is 768. Sometimes you might base your choice something on other than the device size. It might be based on what's in your content, or the size of something in your content may determine when you want to make a change to the style. So there are a lot of ways to get this result where we've got image and secondary next to each other. But there's flex is really nice for this. So changing whether things flow vertically or horizontally is really easy to do with flex. So we're going to use the flex property for flex items in order to do this. The flex property actually sets three things: flex, shrink, grow, and basis. And if we only specify one parameter to it, though, it changes flex grow. And that's the attribute we're going to take advantage of. So by default, flex grow is equal to 0, which means that the size of the flex item doesn't change when there's more space available. That item stays the same size. And then we could use things like justify content to put space around, or to center everything, or to bring it all to the left or to the right. But we can use flex grow to say we want this flex item to grow proportionate to the other flex items in that flex container based on an integer value. So if we set main secondary to 1, flex to 1, which sets flex grow to 1, and we set main image flex grow to 0 by saying flex 0, then the result that we'll have is that they'll be on the same row, and main secondary will take up all the extra space, which is what we want, because our image is a fixed size. So this will just have the text kind of grow horizontally as the screen gets wider, and we'll have the image and that text in main secondary on a single row. Okay? So let's give that a try. So in main image, we're going to set flex to 0. Flex goes to 0. And then I think we have to create a section for main secondary. We're going to set flex to 1.
Add that to HTML.
No, we've already got everything tagged in the HTML.
But if you're doing this, you would have.
Oh, but we don't want to do it here. Sorry. What am I doing? We want to do it in a media query. So undo that. Let's go to, at the bottom of our home, we're going to define a media query. So we're going to say media screen and min width 768 pixels. And here's where we want to say main image flex 0, main secondary flex 1. We have this at the bottom of home as CSS. I'll flip back here in a sec. I just want to make sure. So what that does is as soon as we get to 768 pixels, and we can put this on responsive, and you can see that once we get to, that's not centered. We should fix that too. Why isn't that centered? As soon as we get to 768 pixels, then that flex property comes into play. And then the effect of it is that the main secondary will grow, even if you make it bigger. So make sure that you saved, make sure that you didn't have an error.
Is there a semicolon between flex and 0?
There's a colon.
And colon.
Yeah.
And a semicolon. That's got a squiggly line. That's not bad.
So that should be inside of, it needs to be inside of main image. See? Inside of main image, flex 0. Now, there's still an issue with our image. Did you see that? There. That's not what we want. And that's because if we look at main image, the section, see how it takes up the whole space? But that image is inside of it, and we need to center the image in that space. Okay? So we can do that by setting margin auto. So in here, if we here in main image, did you set both of them? Hold on, I'll come see in a second. That did not do it. What did I do? My other one. Does your media query look like this?
Oh, you got a capital like.
Oh, you shouldn't have a capital.
It does look like that. Okay, now puts the text over there, but it all runs off the page still.
Main, secondary.
Where does it run off the page?
If I go to iPad, yeah, it runs off the page if I go to iPad. See how it runs off the page?
It runs off the page
Mine does.
for iPad.
Yeah.
Does it run off the page for anybody else if you look at it in Inspector? Or is it contained? It's contained? Yeah, it's contained for me too. I think some of this is Inspector strangeness, although I still can't explain this.
What have I got wrong then?
I don't know that you've got anything wrong, Vic.
Did you just put stuff in an image or
That's all I did.
what is an image?
No, an image I didn't put anything. I put it in and I took it out because it didn't make any difference.
Well, mine runs off the page.
Okay, we'll have a look at it in a minute. We'll just go on. So, to make that change, to get the layout to change for the wider screen, we didn't have to make a big change, right? That was like tiny. We made the tiniest change in that media query, and I promised you if we did it the other way, if we developed for desktop first and then tried to make it look good in mobile, we'd have to do a lot more to get that styling to look right in mobile, and then we'd end up having to change some of our default styling, and it would just get to be a real mess. So just always do mobile first. So for the desktop screen size, which is generally 1281 pixels, is considered to be desktop screen size. All I'm going to do is increase the font size. To 1.5 EM for header, main text, and nav. So I'm going to add another media query. Min width 1281 and in header, main text, nav, I'm just going to make it a half an EM bigger.
Why don't you have a semicolon after it?
After what?
Parentheses.
Yeah, that's right. It's just an argument, just like with our mix-ins. It's not even an argument. It's a conditional statement, and we just have to put quotes around it. No, what that will do is when I have a full-size screen, then it just makes the font a little bit bigger.
Did you go to responsive and then
The thing is my screen's not big enough for me. I just took it off because my screen's not big enough for me to see it change and query it. So I'm going to, what I'll do is I'll show you how to deploy this in GitHub Pages. So if you go to your repo and you go to settings. Settings for the repo, just right. And then you scroll down to GitHub Pages. It's just down the page, near the bottom.
What have you got in? Where's that?
So for me, it's down here just above Danger Zone. GitHub Pages.
Oh, yep.
And then you'll select your master branch. But the thing is if I'm not going to update the code in the master branch here. But if you do that and set it to your master branch, do it on another one. Let me fork this. Hang on. That's all right. That's okay. I'm just forking it so I can show you. Okay, so if I go to settings on my fork and I change this to master and I'm just going to keep that name, then here it says it's ready to be published here. So if I click on that, there's my site published through GitHub Pages. So it's that easy to publish it through GitHub Pages. Now every time I update master, there'll be a bit of a delay, like you probably should give 5 minutes or something. But every time I push to this, it'll update what's deployed here. So you can deploy your portfolio this way if you want, or you can use Netlify. Or you can use something else if there's something else you want to use, as long as it's deployed somewhere that you can get to it from outside of your machine. Okay? I just want to see what it looks like here. See, it looks fine here. Let me see what it looks like on my phone from here. So interesting because it's the same code. This is why I love CSS so much.
So you haven't refreshed it to Netlify. Have you?
No, not with those last changes. I haven't. I just want to see what it looks like from this one. Here, I'll put it in. I'm going to copy this one and put it in Slack. Try clicking on that one from your phone. No, see, it goes off the screen on my phone too, from that one. Even though it looks okay from here. It does for me too, even though it looks okay from here. It doesn't go off the screen here, but it does on my phone too. So weird. I don't know why that is. I'm going to have to look at it because when I did the same thing this weekend, it didn't go off the side of my phone.
Right.
And it had the same code.
There must be something we didn't do.
There might be. I'm going to have to look.
Yeah.
Well, where's the one you saved that you did on the weekend?
When I look at it now, it goes off the screen on my phone, but it didn't earlier. Okay, so just to finish up, what other things could you do? So,
We can change the color.
so sometimes people get tempted to add or remove content. You know, not a good idea to do with HTML and CSS. It just generally causes problems somewhere. So, like there are some tricks to like override images by setting backgrounds to an image and a div or something and replacing an image that's there, but that's not really a good way to do things. If you want to replace content, if you want to add, remove content, you really should do that with JavaScript. We'll get there quickly enough. You can do something where you know how you can set the image size with width and height? So you can actually load up a large image, so have a large high resolution image in your images directory, for example, and refer to that image in your HTML. But in CSS, you can set the width and height to something smaller, and the browser will scale down the image, not just chop it off. It'll scale down the image to the dimensions that you put in your CSS. But the thing to keep in mind is it's still going to load that really big image. So if you're worried about the load time to load the really big images, then you should scale down the images and refer to the scaled down images. But one way though to change, if I included a larger image in my images directory and pointed to that for my index HTML, I could manipulate how big the image displayed on the screen in different screen sizes. So that's one thing that's okay to do with CSS. It is, I think, though, important to know how to take images and scale them down within an image. Can't think of the word right now. Yes, thank you. An image manipulation tool. How many people do that sort of stuff already? Some people do. I like GIMP for that because it's free, and I've used it for a long time, so I'm comfortable with it. But if you have the Adobe suite, you can use Photoshop for that. I'm sure there are other tools that do it too, but I really like GIMP. So I'll also use GIMP to do things like set transparency layers and things like that. If I grab, I used it to, I grabbed those LinkedIn and Twitter icons from the web, and then I changed them to white. I changed them to purple at one point, but then I didn't put the purple ones in there. But you can use GIMP to change the color, of icons and things like that. I like to use it like that. If you guys are interested, we can do, I'll do a GIMP lightning talk one day or something. I'll show you some of the things that you can do with it if you're not familiar with it. So what you can do for the rest of the day is have a play with some of this to start building your portfolio maybe. Just try some things out. It doesn't have to be your portfolio. You can use this site just to play with, to try some things, to see how it's different layout settings, using different grid or flex settings might change the way that things are appearing. Have a play with the media queries. You can grab some other images off the internet that are different sizes and have a play with changing the image size. And tomorrow I'll release the portfolio. Well, I won't. The portfolio assessment will be released in Canvas, but you already have the rubric and the deliverable, so you can just work from that. You're free to start on that now. I'm still waiting for confirmation about when exactly the portfolio is going to be due, but it's looking like it'll be Sunday evening, sometime Sunday week, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday in the evening, and then you'll present it on that Monday. Any questions about the portfolio assessment?